With the help of Hashem, we are learning Chagiga Daf Zayin. We left off on Daf Vav on the base, the last line in the bottom of the Amid. We're going to begin today by quoting a Mishnah that all of us say every morning after Birchas HaShachar, Ki Yadua, that we say both a pasuk in Chumash after we make the blessings, and that's Birchas Kohanim, as well as we quote a part of Torah Shebal Peh, which is the first Mishnah, the first Perek of Masechtas Peah, Elu Devarim She'ein Lahem Shiur. The following mitzvahs don't have a lower limit, they don't have an upper limit, as we'll explain, even though the more you do, the greater the mitzvah, the more the mitzvah. One of the mitzvahs that are mentioned in the Mishnah is Hara Oyoin, which means the mitzvah either of appearing in the Beis HaMikdash or coming with a carbon oila, or both. And as we will see, there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish how to understand this line in the Mishnah, this mitzvah of ra'ayin. Really, the question is, for sure, showing up many times throughout Yom Tov. Every time you come, you fulfill again the mitzvah of appearing in the Beis HaMikdash. The question is one obligated, that's the initial understanding, to bring with him every time they show up over Yom Tov another carbon oila? That Rabbi Yechanan holds that mitzvah to show up, but you're not obligated to bring a carbon oila. Reish Lakish, the initial understanding holds that every time you appear throughout Yom Tov, imagine you have to bring another carbon oila, and then the Gemara is going to clarify that that cannot be their argument. Everyone will hold that when you show up on the first time, you have to bring a carbon oila. But once you bring one time that sacrifice, you're not obligated to bring it every time you come back to the Azara throughout the Yom Tov. The question is whether you are allowed to bring another carbon oila. And as the Gemara will explain, that Rabbi Yechanan subscribes to the concept of Bal Toisif. Interestingly, since I already brought once the first day that I appeared in the Beis HaMikdash on Yom Tov, I brought my carbon oilas re'iyah. If I were to bring another carbon oilas re'iyah, I'm violating thou shall not add to the mitzvahs. Now, Chevra, a carbon oilah can be brought as a donation carbon as many times as you want. We're not speaking about that. We're speaking about someone who's bringing a carbon for the purpose of fulfilling the obligation of bringing a carbon oilah when you appear in the Beis HaMikdash over Yom Tov. That will be the final understanding. Rabbi Yechanan holds that there is a Bal Toisif aspect, you may not, and Reish Lakish holds that you are allowed to. No one holds that you have to. On Daf Zayin Amud Beis, we're going to start the second Mishnah of the Masechta. And really, three dafim, beginning with Zayin, Ches, and Tes, are dafim straight out of Kachim, which is really the topic of the first half of the Masechta. So as we have been learning that there is an obligation to bring a carbon oilas re'iyah, there is another carbon called Shalmei Chagiga. Whenever we run out of the meat of Shalmei Chagiga, there is an obligation connected to V'samachta b'chagecha to bring throughout Yom Tov another carbon that we will call Shalmei Simcha. Question is as follows: for all of us that live in the Holy Land, and we separate the proper Trumas u'Maisres, and we accumulate over the time a lot of money. That is Meiser Sheni money, meaning that the produce that's separated for Meiser Sheni is allowed to be exchanged and redeemed over money, freeing up the produce, but then imbuing that money with the Kedusha of Meiser Sheni. Now that money belongs to the owner, but that money must be taken to Yerushalayim, and you can only use this money to buy food items, which you will buy and consume in Yerushalayim. Question is, we have so many obligations as far as bringing sacrifices over Yom Tov is concerned. We also, most of us, when we come to Yerushalayim, we will have a lot of Meiser Sheni money. Am I allowed to use the Meiser Sheni money to buy these korbanos? That's the topic. Now, I want you to know that B'chlal, people would use the Meiser Sheni money to buy carbon shlomims, but these are donation shlomims. These are not obligatory shlomims. And there is a rule called Kol Davar Shebachayva Eino Ba'a Ela Min Achulin, that whenever I have an obligation that costs money, a mitzvah like here to buy korbanos, I can only buy it from unconsecrated funds. And therefore, we'll begin with the rule that you may not fulfill your obligations by using Meiser Sheni money. But then we'll see in the Mishnah there are many exceptions. Firstly, like we said, and we keep on saying that Chagigas, that Shalmei Chagiga is like an obligation. Shalmei Simcha means that since I have to have joy over Yom Tov, and joy is also had by having meat, and it includes, and actually it's ideal to have sacrificial meat. But if a person were to bring any other obligatory carbon, like the Shalmei Chagiga, you already fulfilled the Simcha by eating the Shalmei Chagiga. So as far as buying additional Shalmei Simcha is concerned, you are allowed to use Meiser Sheni money. As far as buying Oilas Re'iyah, we will see you may not use Meiser Sheni money. However, when it comes to buying the Shalmei Chagiga, there's going to be a phenomenal machlokes that will have to be explained, and that's already going to lead us into the final daf. The next daf Ches. We're going to also learn, if we'll have time in this daf, some rules regarding Pesach, how on the 14th day of Pesach, end of Pesach, there was another Chagiga that was brought that's called Chagigas Yudalit, and God willing, if we'll get there, we'll explain all of these details as we unpackage today's daf. So we are up to Davav, Amid Basic, and the last line in the Amid. We are familiar with the Mishnah, and let's learn it inside. Tanach and Hassan, we learned over there in Peah. Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Elu Devarim, the following things, referring to mitzvahs, she'ein lahem shiur, they have no measure. What do we mean by a measure? Certain mitzvahs have a minimum measure. They have what we call a under limit, that if it's done less than, like for example, we have to eat matzah on Pesach. Well, you have to eat a kazayis. If you ate less than a kazayis, you did not fulfill the obligation. That's called a measure. It's called an under measure. A max measure means there are certain mitzvahs that once you did it to a certain point, adding doesn't add to the mitzvah, doesn't do anything. Ein lahem shiur means that there is no minimum amount, but there's no maximum amount. No matter how much you add, you continuously get a greater mitzvah. And let's go through the various mitzvahs. So Daf Zayin. Number one, Peah. Peah is a mitzvah that when we own land in the Holy Land and we harvest whatever we are growing there, every field needs to leave, the owner, when he harvests, needs to leave an edge. Peah means a corner, but it doesn't mean a corner. It means an edge, a little end of the field at any point that they want for the poor. Now, biblically, I can harvest the entire field and leave one stalk, and I fulfill the mitzvah of Peah. That's the meaning. There is no minimum measure. On the other hand, if I were to harvest only one stalk and leave everything else for the poor, I fulfill the mitzvah of Peah. In other words, it's not that I have to take for myself a certain amount. I can leave the minimum and I can leave the maximum, and in both cases, I fulfill the mitzvah. It happens to be clearly that our Mishnah is only speaking about the biblical, the mitzvah on a biblical level, because on a rabbinic level, a person has to leave at least a 60th for the poor. So there is a minimum shiur midrabanan. Our Mishnah again is speaking midoraisa. The next is bikurim. Bikurim is that again, this is connected to the Holy Land, that if a person is growing any one of the 7 items that we praise Eretz Yisrael with, which is wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. So you have to separate the first budding, the first of the fruits, and when you will finally harvest it, you're going to bring it to Yerushalayim with the whole ceremony as it's written out in Parshas Kisavei. So how much do you have to bring to Yerushalayim from each one of these 7 species? There is no minimum amount, and there's no maximum amount. The more, the better. The more, the better, meaning the more you bring, the greater the mitzvah you have. I want to say there are many mitzvahs that they don't have an upper limit, but there comes a point where you're not adding to the mitzvah. I'll just give you an example. The size of an esrog. So we learned, if you remember, Masechta Sukkah, there is minimum shiurim. Like the lulav has to have at least a tefach and a little bit protruding. More, the lulav has to have, escaping my mind, the minimum shiur. I think it is 3 tvachim or 4 tvachim, enough kedei lenanua. Now, what's the up shiur? There's no limit. But we don't say by the lulav that if you have a foot tall lulav or 5 feet, the 5 feet lulav is even a greater mitzvah. There is no upper limit, but it doesn't mean anything. In our Mishnah, what's unique is that the more, the greater the mitzvah. That's the beautiful thing. So bikurim, the more you bring to Yerushalayim, the greater the mitzvah. But you can fulfill your obligation by bringing just the first of the 7. I want you to know that the Rambam holds that also midrabanan, bikurim has to be at least a 60th of that product. So again, there is a minimum shiur, but only midrabanan, and the Mishnah is speaking about midoraisa. Now, this is going to be our topic. The third item mentioned in the Mishnah is hara'ayin, which is the mitzvah of appearing. So when we go to Yerushalayim over the 3 Yomim Tovim, and we come into the Beis HaMikdash, ideally on the first day, did I fulfill my obligation? Yes, I did. But if I'm going to appear again, on the same day again, tomorrow again, I'm getting more mitzvah. And I can appear as many times as I want. And every time I appear, I'm getting an additional mitzvah for appearing in the Beis HaMikdash over Yom Tov. Now, what will become clear in our sugya is that the word hara'ayin doesn't only mean appearing. It also means to bring a korban oilas re'iyah. If that would be the meaning, then the Mishnah would be saying that every time you come, either you have to bring another korban, or if you bring every time another korban oilas re'iyah, you're great, you're getting another mitzvah. That will be the topic of our sugya. But let's finish the Mishnah. Gemilas chasadim. Gemilas chasadim doesn't have a minimum amount. Any act of kindness is a mitzvah, and the more you do, the greater the mitzvah. And as we know, that midrabanan, when it comes to gemilus chasadim with one's finances, there is midrabanan an upper limit. As Chazal tell us that Aliyah vazveis yoiser mechaimish, a person should not give more than 20% of what they own to tzedakah, and then kiyudua, that the Alter Rebbe paskins, not only alpi pnimius, but alpi nigla, alpi halacha, that this is only true for people that only give tzedakah for the mitzvah of tzedakah. But since tzedakah also has an aspect of kapara involved, when a person does tshuva, adding to the tshuva tzedakah is like bringing a korban, and we all need to do tshuva. And when it comes to the healing of the soul, like when it comes to the healing of the body, Chazal never put a limit, or you can't spend more than that amount of money by a doctor. A person would sell all their belongings to get healing if they have to. And if that's true for the body, that's certainly true for the soul. So the Alter Rebbe holds that nowadays that we all need tshuva and we all need kapara, there isn't even an upper limit midrabanan. But again, our Mishnah is speaking about midorais. And the final one is Talmud Torah. Now, Talmud Torah, I want you to know that there is a concept of the higisa b'yoymon b'layla, which means that when a person has free time, they should spend it by learning Torah. So there is, you can't say there's no minimum. No, you have to learn in all your free time. But if you have no free time, then you can fulfill the mitzvah of learning by day and by night by learning just a little bit in the day and a little bit by night, having 2 shiurim. And on the other hand, the more you learn, the greater the mitzvah. Again, that's unique about these mitzvahs. All the other mitzvahs, even if they don't have a limit the way you think they have a limit, but when you add, like we gave an example, you add to the height of the lulav, you're not adding to the mitzvah. These that are mentioned, even though they don't have an under limit, but the more you do, the greater the mitzvah. And now let's begin with the machlokes, how to interpret chara oyoin, which generally refers to the mitzvah of appearing in the Beis HaMikdash over Yom Tov. So Amar Rabbi Yechon on the second line from the top, that kisfurim anu loymar, that we initially understood that when the Mishnah speaks about chara oyoin, here it only means chara oyoin ein lo shir l'maylam, that there is no upper limit. In other words, you can bring as many korbanos oilas re'iyah as you want. And and the chiddush will be that we don't say once you brought one oilas re'iyah, bringing another oilas re'iyah is bal toisiv. No, there's not. There's no upper limit. Avol yesh lo shir l'matam, but there is a minimum limit. What's the minimum limit? First Mishnah, if you remember, we learned the machlokes b'shamai and b'silul. What's the minimum value of the korban? And the initial understanding of Rabbi Yechanan that this minimum value is a biblical concept. If midairaisa, whether beishamai, whether beisilul, whether 1 ma'ah, whether 2 ma'ah would be a din dairaisa, then there is an under limit because it can be an animal that has less than that value. And the Limade, and he told us that that on a biblical level, there isn't a minimum amount. If you find an animal that's worth less than the shiurim given either by Beis Shammai or than Beis Hillel, you'll fulfill their obligation. The minimum amount of money is midrabanan. This is quoting the sheet of Beis Hillel, and the Chagiga has to have shtei kesef. So now it's very consistent that since the Mishnah is speaking about midai raisa, all of the cases enumerated in the Mishnah, Peya, Bikurim, Hara'oyin, Gemilas Chasadim, and Talmud Torah, have no under limit and they have no max limit. Now the question is,
can you speak out the difference in taich between Hara'iyah and Hara'ayon?
So the word Re'iyah, as we'll see right now, at least according to Rashi, refers to the carbon. Ra'ayon implies appearing, and it actually has almost like a double connotation. That's the next line in the Gemara, Yaakov. My Hara'ayon, why didn't the Mishnah say Hara'iyah? Then it would be clear we're speaking about the sacrifice. The fact that the Mishnah uses the words Hara'ayon means that we are also speaking about the mitzvah of appearing on Yom Tov. So Rabbi Yechanan Omar, it means Re'iyas panim ba'azarom. In other words, the initial understanding, what it is that we are dafken not speaking about a carbon. We are dafken not speaking about a. We are speaking about appearing. In other words, that the point of the Mishnah is that you appeared once, you fulfilled your obligation. And you can appear as many times as you want, and every time you show up again, you get another mitzvah. And listen to the in between the line, and you don't need to appear with a carbon. It's the first time I come to the Beis Hamikdash. The Torah says, "V'lo yera'u panai reika." I cannot come empty-handed. If I'm going to show up without a carbon oilas re'iyah, you can argue it's not only that I kept the mitzvah, I did the mitzvah of showing up, I just missed the mitzvah of not coming empty-handed. Part of appearing the first time means to appear with a sacrifice. If a person didn't come with a sacrifice, they are lacking the mitzvah of appearing. But that's only the first time. Once you came the first time with a carbon, now you can come, and every time you come, you get a mitzvah of appearing, and you don't need to bring a sacrifice. That's the initial Rabbi Yechanan. Shlakish disagrees, and he says, the Mishnah is speaking about both. Yeah, there is no upper limit. You can come as many times as you want. But every time you come over Yom Tov, you have to come with another carbon. And just like the first time, if you appeared without a carbon, it's not that you kept one mitzvah, but you violated the negative mitzvah. No, you are lacking in the mitzvah of showing up. Showing up means to show up with a sacrifice. That's what showing up means. Amazing concepts. The Shlakish says that's true not only the first time, even though once you brought a carbon the first time, you fulfilled your obligation. And on a biblical level, the carbon can have even less value than the ma'ah. But if you're going to come again, you have to come with the carbon. Says the Gemara like this. The ikar haregel, the word ikar means the first day or the first time you're showing up. The ikar haregel kol amalei pligi, the iyas panim becarbon, that you have to show up with a carbon. And guys, many people can argue, is there a concept of esadoi chaloisasa, as we will learn in Yavamis in the beginning? Because there's a mitzvah to show up. There's a negative mitzvah, v'lo yero panai reikam. What happens if a person cannot even afford the carbon? Should they show up? At least they're doing the positive? No, we don't say that here. Again, the meaning of showing up the first time means with a carbon. And there's no debate about that. Ki pligi, again, this is the initial understanding of their machlokes. B'sha'ar yemais harego, during the other days of the Yom Tov. And by the way, according to many Rishonim, not only during the other days of Yom Tov. If a person showed up the first day in the morning, at night there's no karbanis. And then they went home, and then they want to come back from Mincha in the Azara, in the temple compound. This also is part of the question. Do we say that every time the fact that you left, now you are re-entering, you are reappearing, you got to come with a carbon? So again, the Gemara says like this. Again, the initial understanding, if you are opting to bring every time you come back a carbon, the initial understanding is that no one is suggesting that there is a violation of adding to the mitzvahs. You can bring it. Kipligi, what's the initial understanding of the argument? If you came again and you didn't bring a carbon, the asavaloyaisi, Rabbi Yechanan holds the iyas panim ba'azara, the cholemas, the asi loitzarech lasuye. The Mishnah, Yaakov used the words ra'ayin. The Mishnah did not use the words re'iyah to emphasize that Re'iyah has a limit. Once you brought it once, you don't have to bring it again. You could, but you don't have to. Showing up, every time you show up, you're doing the mitzvah of showing up. The Shlakish says, no, Ra'ayin means both. There's no upper limit. If you came once with the carbon, you're good to go. But if you want to come again, you get a mitzvah, but you only get a mitzvah if you come with a carbon. The iyaspanim be carbon, meaning the whole aim is us. Throughout the Yontif, every time you appear, you have to, Sodech Lasuya, you have to bring a carbon. Well, now,
if they don't have money for a carbon, do they not come at all? If they don't have enough money for the first carbon?
They would, the one, according to Basil, David, if the person had money to travel, if a person has money to buy a piece of bread, you have money to buy a carbon. People say they don't have money, you have to know what that means. Okay, you're asking what about a real destitute person that doesn't have food on Yom Tov? What does that person do if they don't have food on Yom Tov? God forbid. They would borrow money, right? No one is going to starve to death. So part of the living for a Yid is that you have this Yiddishkeit. Like, what do you can't borrow. In other words, you can't borrow someone else's tefillin, meaning you can't borrow someone else's carbon. You got to have your own. Okay. It says in the pasuk, "V'lo yero panayrekom." Don't show up empty-handed. How can you allow the person to come on Yom Tov again without a carbon? So Amalei, the verse in Mishpatim is only speaking about the ikar hanegel, which means the first time. Another question. Esvei says in a braysa on this pasuk, "V'lo yero panayrekom," says the braysa that means dafke bizvachim. Animal sacrifices. Says the Braisa, do you say that it only means animal sacrifices? Maybe it also allows for you to bring bird sacrifices. Maybe it should allow for you to bring flower sacrifices. Says the Braisa, no. Vidinhu. Logically, it has to be animal sacrifices. Why? Because Chagiga lehedyet, the mitzvah of Chagiga is clearly an animal, because in the mitzvah of bringing a chagiga, shalmei chagiga, the Torah says, "V'lo yolin chelev chagi ad boichem." The Torah is speaking about a certain specific detail of an animal sacrifice, which is that the fats have to be burnt either on the day that the blood was sprinkled or night after, but you can't allow it to go into the next day. In other words, the fact that the Torah links the fats to Chagiga clearly indicates that the carbon Chagiga has to be an animal. Birds don't have these fats. Flowers don't have these fats. And the Torah also speaks about the mitzvah of Re'iyah, which is the oil, which is to God. So it doesn't make sense. So ma Chagiga, ha'amura lehedyet, just like the Chagiga, which is also eaten by the person, is only zevachim. So af Re'iyah makes sense, should only be as it is. Ha'amura legavaya can only be an animal sacrifice. The Braisa continues. What zvachim are we talking about? Oilois, animals that are completely burnt up. Furthermore, asks the Braisa, Ata oimer oilois, maybe the Re'iyah is also a shlamim. So the Braisa answers, no, it's not. Again, logically, I will tell you that the zevach has to be an oil, because nemra chagiga lehedyet, v'nemra Re'iyah legavoya. So in other words, it says Re'iyah legavoya. Rashi says, it says lo yero panai, don't see my face empty-handed, which implies that what I'm asking you right now is for me. Don't see my face empty-handed, because what you will bring will be for me, meaning for God. Ma chagiga, that is lehedyet, is beroloi. It's a carbon that is fit to be eaten by the owner, because that's the nature of a shlamim. Some of it is eaten by the owner. Af re'iyah ha'amura legavaya. Again, from the words, don't see my face, what you're bringing is for me. It means something that's exclusively for God, which means a carbon oil. And then the Braisa says, the final line, and it makes sense. It doesn't make sense that your table is going to be full of food. And the shulchan rabcha, the table of your master, referring to God, is going to be empty? That can be. So 1 second. Now we know that our table is full with korbanos, not only on the first day, not only on the second day, like we keep on mentioning. The moment I run out of the meat from the shalmei chagiga, because of the other mitzvah of simcha, v'samachta v'chagecha, I have to bring throughout the Yom Tov. If I don't have other sacrificial meat, I have to constantly bring shlamims. In other words, my table is going to be filled with meat because of the samachta b'chagecha throughout Yom Tov. So the Gemara is asking logically, since we are saying we don't want for your table to be full and God's table to be empty. If that's the case, then a carbon oilas re'iyah should be brought throughout Yom Tov. Should be brought throughout Yom Tov. Because if not, there's going to be days in the Yom Tov that I'm going to have sacrificial meat on my table, but nothing is going to be brought for God. Again, this l'chu'ura is a question on Rabbi Yechanan. So again, Rabbi Yechanan will say, no, be'ikar regel. This logic, we will only say on the first day. We don't have to say it throughout. Okay. Eisvei, nachakashem. It says in Abraisa, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, Sholish, Regalam Hashana. Throughout 3 times in the year. It's Tava Yisrael Alis Beregel. The Jewish people were commanded to go up to walk up to the Azaram. What are the 3 dates? Chag HaMatzos, and in the Chag HaShavuos, and in the Chag HaSukkos. Says the Braisa, says Rabbi Yossi, statement number 1 that is enigmatic, that will have to be explained. The A nidin chatzoyin. Don't come in halves, or don't come in groups. The Gemara will explain soon what that means. Why? Because it says kol zechurcha, all of your menfold. Let's shelve that. We're going to come back to this. Another rule: the ein nidin reikanim. Don't come empty-handed, because it says v'lo yiro panareka. So again, it's mashma. Don't come empty-handed would mean that every time you re-enter the temple complex throughout these holidays, you should have to bring another carbon. And lo yiro panareka is specific to oilas re'iyah, as we just quoted. So again, Rabbi Yechanan will faranfer amalayno beikar haregel. Okay. Now finally, the opposite direction. Rabbi Yechanan is now going to challenge Reish Lakish. Now I think all of these challenges were not done in between them. I think this is the Gemara bringing up challenges as if Rabbi Yechanan asked Reish Lakish, as if Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yechanan, because we'll see in a few lines that we completely misunderstood their opinions. So let's, based on this understanding, this would be the question that Rabbi Yechanan would ask of Reish Lakish. And we had this chazal already a few times in the Masechta. And even though we have the mikra, we have the way we know the Torah has to be read in public. And that is, we read the words yei ra'eh, but since the Torah has no vowels, there is a possibility of reading the correct letters, Yud Reish Aleph, Hey, Yira, and we learn one from the other. Yira, Yera. God seeing us and us seeing God have to be similar. Now, we learned that above regarding the blind person in one eye. But now we're going to learn another chazal. And what is that? That ma ani bechinam. God sees us without bringing a carbon. God doesn't bring a carbon when he comes to the temple to see us. Af atam bechinam. When we go, we can see God also. Now, you don't have to pay every time you enter the temple with a carbon. Now this is mamish a kasha against Reish Lakish. If the understanding of Reish Lakish it would have been the way we had until now, Reish Lakish holds that during Yom Tov, every time you show up, you got to bring a carbon. Every time you walk into the shul, you got to make a donation. Then that's not what it says in this Braisa. This Braisa clearly says that the first time you have to bring a carbon. Not every time. You can show up bechina. You can show up for free. You don't have to pay a ticket every time. And therefore, the Gemara revises its understanding of their argument, the first white line. This is very important. And it's not that they changed their minds. We now get to the right understanding. Every time a Jew comes into the temple throughout Yom Tov, as long as I brought the carbon the first time I came on Yom Tov, ideally it should be the first day. Once I fulfilled that mitzvah, I am allowed to come back as many times as I want, and I don't have to bring a carbon. The question is, if I am opting in to bring another oilas re'iyah, I brought the first time. I fulfilled my obligation. Now I'm coming back, and I want to bring not a donation, which I can bring donation karbanis, not on Yom Tov, but during Cholamayid. I want to bring an oilas re'iyah. Rabbi Yechanan holds re'iyas panim ba'azara, that when the Braisa says, when the Mishnah says hara oyoin has no upper limit, the Braisa only means appearing. Re'iyas panim u'de'ein lo shiur, which means that re'iyah itself, the carbon re'iyah, has an upper limit. You know what the upper limit is? You can only bring one. And if you're going to want to bring more than one, you are not allowed to. This is called a violation of Baal Tosef, which is fascinating. Because normally Baal Tosef would mean, let's say when I put on tefillin has 4 portions, I'm going to add a 5th portion. So while I'm doing the mitzvah, I'm adding a part to it. Now, what happens if I put on my tefillin and I take off my tefillin and I put on my tefillin and I take off my tefillin? People do it a lot. There's no Baal Tosef at all. Here we're saying by karbanos, it's not that way. I'm going to bring another carbon oilas re'iyah, I'm violating Baal Tosef. Let me tell you another heads up, which will make this even more fascinating. Even according to this final understanding, and indeed, Rabbi Yechanan and Bechal, we pass like Rabbi Yechanan holds that once I showed up once and I fulfilled the mitzvah of bringing the carbon oilah, on that Yom Tiv, I'm not allowed to bring another carbon oilah. When you come the first time, don't think you can only bring one carbon oilah. When I come the first time, I can bring 10 karbanos oilah. I can bring 1,000 karbanos oilah the first time. But once I brought it, when I appeared for the first time, when I reappear, I'm not allowed to bring any more karbanos oilas re'iyah. And the Shlakish holds the iyaspanim bekarban that when the Mishnah says hara'oyin has no upper limit, it also means bringing as many karbanos as you want. Not only during the first time, everyone agrees you can bring as many as you want, but every time you reappear, you could opt in to reappear with a carbon. Da'afilu karbanami ein lo shiur. Now that this is taka what they are arguing about, so now comes a question that is going to be asked by team Rabbi Yechanan against team Reish Lakish. It says a pasuk in Mishlei, Hoikar raglocha mi beis reyacha. Make your feet scarce when you are in the house of your friend. The pshat of this pasuk is, and we all know this in our bones, that if you are a guest in someone's home, don't overstay your time. Your taka being received nicely, but then in Brazil they say that a guest is like a fish. After 3 days, it starts to stink. Now we have to be very hospitable, but King Solomon is giving that's the pshat, a good eitzah. Hoika means make it expensive, make it scarce, make it something that you don't just keep on staying in your in your base reyacha. However, the Beraisa is understanding this pasuk is referring to karbanos. And means that don't keep on coming and showing up and bringing karbanos. Shlakish says keep on coming back and bring karbanos and bring another carbon. You brought it, let it be. That's a kasha. Answers the Gemara, no. The type of karbanos that the Braisa is applying this verse for are karbanos chatas and hashamos. The Braisa is really saying that King Solomon is saying, don't feel that since after the fact, after the sin, you can rectify by bringing sacrifices, lest the person say, okay, so I'll sin and I'll keep on calm and I'll bring karbanos. The pasuk is saying, no, don't bring karbanos. It means don't sin to bring karbanos. Hassan b'chatois v'shamois kid Rab Levi. Rab Levi already pointed out this contradiction. It says this verse in Mishlei, which is understood also to mean that bringing karbanos should be something scarce, should be something that we don't do that often. But on the other hand, it says in Tehillim, I will always come to your house bringing karbanos. So is it something great to continuously bring sacrifices or not? And the answer is, Rabbi Levi answers like Hashem, chatois and hashamois, that is something that hoika raglocha. In other words, don't sin and you won't have to bring karbanos. And Kan Shlamim and Tanya Nami Hachi, not only did an Almeida understand it that way, but we found this later even in a work of Tanoim in a Braisa, when it says, so the Braisa says, Braisa is asking on itself, maybe there's an inyan not to bring too many sacrifices. No, that there is not. That I'm going to come into your house with an oilah. And I'm always going to pay my vows of sacrifices. They're not supposed to be scarce. The more, the better. The Frierdiker Rebbe once visited the yeshiva in Atvatsk. came to visit his yeshiva. And the Bachrim on their own, they were davening mincha. They had the Rebbe was them. They skipped Tachnun. They didn't say Tachnun. So the Frierdiker Rebbe turned and he says, "What's today? There's no Tachnun." So they told him, "The Rebbe's here. The Rebbe's here. We're going to say Tachnun." So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, "The Rebbe's here is a reason why not to sin, not a reason not to say Tachnun." In other words, don't sin and don't bring karbonis, chatois, and ashomis. Oilas and shlamim, Reish Lakish holds, the more the better. And even oilas and iyah, even though you fulfilled your obligation, every time you come back, again, not that you're obligated, but it's going to be accepted. That's the meaning that has no upper limit. You don't have to, but the more, the better. And every time you do it, you get another mitzvah. Okay. We learned above in the Braisa, when it says kol zechurcha, so the Braisa says that we should not appear in groups, or we should not appear in halves. The ein nidin chatzoin. What does that mean? So Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yosef initially understood that this means, listen to this, that man the east lay asar amanim, if someone has 10 sons, think about it. Practically, you have 10 sons, and you come to the Beis Hamikdash, and you want to have the experience with your children. So you'd say, I'm not going to bring all 10 on the same day. I'll bring 5 today, and I'll bring 5 tomorrow. Like this, I can give every child more attention. If there's a tremendous amount of people, we know from 770, there's pushing, I can protect them better. So a person should not say, don't bring half today and half tomorrow. That's the meaning of the Braisa. Everyone in your group should come up together. So the Gemara says, the fact is that it's correct. Don't bring 5 only tomorrow, but we don't need a verse for that. That's Zayin Amud Beis. Amalei Abaya, classic. Abaya told Rabbi Yosef, Shita, what, I need a verse for that. How can a father who is aspiring to be an educator, a real father, how can he ever not bring 5 today? Which 5 will he not bring today? He's going to be teaching some of his children to delay doing mitzvahs. Wow, the word poishim normally means a person who's mamish violating a commandment on purpose. The word poishim here means to be a person that's lazy, to be a person that's negligent. Now, the truth is, if a person comes to Yerushalayim and for whatever reason they didn't enter the temple compound on the first day, then they should enter tomorrow. And the first time they come, they are obligated to bring a carbon oilas re'iyah. We know that. But you never l'chatchila tell a person, come go tomorrow. You have to go the first opportunity. A father would never keep 5 away. And which ones are...
Rabbi, these are sons that are over bar mitzvah?
These are the sons that are over bar mitzvah. And mitzat chinuch, the sons that he can walk holding their hands. Same concept. You don't want to be machanach a child. Some children are going to be zrizim. You're educating some of your children to be expedient, to be diligent, as all should be. And some of them should be Hoishin, Gavalt, should be negligent. So you're right that a father should never bring his sons in groups. Bring them all together the first time, ASAP. But why do we need a pasuk? What's the cause of churcha? So we already learned this above. Like achedim. This is really alluding to that which achedim, Rav Meir's temporary name, taught us elsewhere. The Tanya, achedim oimrim, that if you have people that have a very bad body odor, for example, their livelihood comes from being hamikametz. They gather the manure, the dung of dogs. And the hamitzaref l'choshes, people that are copper smelters, they have a terrible body odor. Or the habursi, people that are tanners, they turn hides into leather. Since they have such a bad odor, peturim in hariyah, they are exempt from the obligation of appearing during these 3 times of the year, because it says kol zechurcha, all of your menfolk, teaching you misha yachala alois and kol zechurcha, someone who's able to go up together with everyone else. They are obligated. They are unable to go with everyone else. Now it's really everyone else is unable to go up with them. They don't even smell how bad they smell. But since the bottom line is that they really are they're confined to live in isolation. People don't live with them. So anyone that is isolated in a group is exempt from the obligation of going up. That's the meaning of chatzoyin. Okay.
And exempt here means really they're not allowed to go. right? I mean, you don't want the guy to say, I don't have to, but I'm going to go up anyway, and then no one can stand next to the guy, right?
I don't know. That's a good question, Danny. Maybe there are different times at night when very few people are there anyway. I think, and let me add to that. So Danny's making a point. Maybe they're not allowed to go. I don't think that's Yom Tov related. Is there? What about in their local synagogue? What about in the local shop? I think because of Avos Yisrael, they should have the decency of understanding that it's very difficult to be in their presence. I don't think it's uniquely related to the Beis HaMikdash, even though maybe because they have a bad odor, maybe because it was packed with people, could be there. They're going to be there's a greater emphasis of them not inconveniencing the others by showing up. But then if no one were to be there, it's 2 a.m. and it's pouring rain and all the people are not there, maybe they could. They're not mechuyev, they're not obligated. All right. Chavre, the second Mishnah in the Masechta, and I just to give a heads up for people that are not familiar with the whole Seder of Kachin, like Daf Zayin, Daf Ches, Daf Tes, we are learning pure Kachin. And there's a certain beauty in these types of sugyas. Now, as we spoke out in our introduction, first of all, there is a total of 3 types of karbanos that are connected to appearing in the temple. Number 1 is oilas re'iyah. Number 2 is shalmei chagiga. And then you have the concept that throughout Yom Tov, the samachta b'chagecha, have sacrificial meat. And for that, you have meat from any types of karbanos. Now, if a person made a vow and they brought a carbon over Yom Tov, so now they have meat, sacrificial meat. If a person had meiser behema and they bring it when they're there Yom Tov, they have sacrificial meat, that for sure will exempt and that will allow them to fulfill the mitzvah of the samachta b'chagecha. We're going to begin to focus on the karbanos that I'm obligated to bring because I am appearing and because it's Yom Tov. That's called an obligation. And there is this rule that kol davar shebachayva eino ba ela min achulin. You know what? This topic is very similar to the question that now it became common practice for people to give what we call meiser ksafim, right? 10%, 20% of your financial earnings. I'm obligated to educate my children. Can I use my meiser money for chinuch? It's the same type of issue. And the answer will be that any expenditure that I am obligated to engage in, like educating my sons, even limiting it to the minimum limitation, since I am anyways mechuyev to do it, the money cannot come from money that anyways is designated for tzedakah. Here we're speaking about the question, like we mentioned, it was just the reality that people who went to Yerushalayim would take with them Meiser Sheni money. Meiser Sheni money doesn't grow, but the produce that is designated to be Meiser Sheni, if I live far away from Yerushalayim, or if I'm not planning to go there, and by the time I plan to go there, the produce will become overly ripe, it's going to be ruined. The Torah explicitly allows me to redeem that produce on money. The kedusha now of the money is Meiser Sheni. Now this money has to be consumed in Yerushalayim. It's not chulin money. It's Meiser Sheni money. Could I use Meiser Sheni money to buy the korbanos of Yom Tov? That's the top. Says the Mishnah. Oilos. When it comes to the first carbon type, oilos re'iyah, you gotta love Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He's gonna keep all of us on our toes. B'moyed and cholamoyed. Cholamoyed. Why cholamoyed? One thing is clear, that oilas re'iyah is an obligation to bring the first time we appear. And ideally, when should we appear? The first day Yom Tov. If we don't appear the first day Yom Tov, the Gemara just called us poishim. Not poishim, we're negligent, we're lazy. So why does the Mishnah speak about using Meiser Sheni money to buy oilos and Chol HaMoed? The Gemara is going to address that. So there's many layers to the Mishnah. So now shelve the Moed. It doesn't only mean Chol HaMoed. There's a reason why it says Moed, but we'll get to that later. Can you use Meiser Sheni money for oilos? No, you may not, and there's no debate about that. Ba'ois only min achulin. Why? Because of the rule that called davar shebachayva eino ba ela min achulin. You can't use your anyways designated Meiser Sheni money to buy a oilas re'iyah. Now, by the way, people would use the Meiser Sheni money not only in the market. many people would use this money to buy shlomim. They would buy sacrifices and they would bring them and then would eat the meat. But these are donated shlomims. These are not shlomims or korbanis that you are obligated to bring because it's Yom Tov. To use it for an oila, you may not. However, b'hashlomim min hamaiser, shlomim means shalmei simcha, the third carbon category. Even though this money needed to be spent anyways, it's not cholim, who cares? If you are going to buy a more korbanei shlomim with ma'aser sheni money and you are eating it, you're fulfilling the samachta b'chagah. Now you would think that shalmei chagiga should be like oilos re'iyah. I get that shalmei simcha is different, but here it's interesting that when it comes to the shalmei chagiga, here we have a machlokes b'shamei and b'sil. And here again, Rebbe adds another layer when he's focusing on Pesach, when really what we are discussing now is not only Pesach related, and the Gemara is going to have to explain why did Rabbeinu HaKadosh speak about the first day of Pesach. But what we're learning now really is for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Yom Tov Hadishin Shel Pesach. The issue now is the Shalmei Chagiga Beishamai Oimrim. The group of Shammai says it has to be exclusively from Chulin. Just like Oilas Re'iyah has to be out of pocket, you cannot use your already consecrated Ma'aser Sheni money. Same thing should be. The same thing is with the Shalmei Chagiga. Beis Hillel disagrees. Beis Hillel says min hamaiser. And as to say right now, let's jump to the end. Min hamaiser does not mean that you can buy all of it from Ma'aser Sheni money. No. Min hamaiser means that some of it could be brought from Ma'aser Sheni money. When I speak about some of it, let's leave the definition of that to the beginning of Daf Ches. But I want to reiterate one point, that even though we learned in today's Daf that there might be an issue of Bal Toisif, which is once you fulfill the mitzvah of the Oilas Re'iyah, when you appear again, you're not even allowed to come with another Oila. That's only when you reappear. When you come the first time, even though Beis Hillel says you can buy an Oila that's only worth a Ma'ah, and a Chagiga only worth 2 Ma'ah. If you want, and sometimes you need, if you have a big family, everyone has a mitzvah to participate in the Shalmei Chagiga. What happens if you have with you 50 people? One animal won't be enough. You will bring many animals, and you can bring many oilos the first time. So the Chagiga, like the oila, could be large animal or can be many animals. Beis Hillel is saying that some of it can come from Ma'aser Sheni, not all of it. Now, again, why not apply the same thing to an oila? We'll leave that for the Gemara. So just recapping, that's important to get this base clearly for the next daf as well. There are 3 carbonates, and they go on extreme sides. Oilas Re'iyah can only come from Chulin money. No Ma'aser Sheni can be used. Shalmei Simcha could be used fully from Ma'aser Sheni money. When it comes to the Shalmei Chagiga, Beis Hillel holds some of it can come from Ma'aser Sheni money. Weiter says the Mishnah, not only can the Shalmei Simcha come from Ma'aser Sheni, it can come from any other carbon. That's the next part of the Mishnah. Yisrael can fulfill their obligation of Shalmei Simcha by bringing carbonas that they were anyways obligated to bring. So if a person made a neder or a nedava, these are different types of vows. And when they come to the Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash on Yom Tov, they are anyways bringing these carbonas to fulfill their obligation. Fine, you can use these animals to fulfill your obligation of Shalmei Simcha. Or Umayser Behema, when you own, right, as we know the dinim, if you have from the 3 animal types of bakar, vatzoin, domesticated, this is cattle and sheep and goats, then you gather them together in a pen, and there are certain times rabbinically you do it throughout the year, 3 times throughout the year, and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 10th animal is an animal that you paint with a red dye, and you declare that the 10th is holy to God. Who owns that carbon? You do. But you can't eat it in your shtetl. You got to take it to Yerushalayim, and you got to offer it as a carbon, and it's like a shlamim. So again, you're obligated to bring it anyways. I don't care. If you bring it over Yom Tov, now you have sacrificial meat. You will fulfill the mitzvah of the Samachta B'Chagecha with it. Now, up until here, it's not only Yisrael. That's a Yisrael. That's Kohanim. Now we're going to learn unique for Kohanim. Kohanim, they get a part of every chatos and every asham. B'char animal is given to the kohen. From every carbon shlomim, they get the chazeh and the shoik, right? The breast and the right thigh. In other words, same concept, that if the kohen is gifted sacrificial meat, if they eat it over Yom Tov, they are fulfilling the mitzvah of simcha. So Shalmei Simcha could be fulfilled with otherwise karbanis that were obligated to be brought anyways. It could be fulfilled with meat that they are obligated to eat anyways. Doesn't bother me. Okay. However, as we just quoted today, that this goes on everything. Shalmei Chagiga and Shalmei Simcha, even Shalmei Simcha cannot come from anything other than meat, even if it's sacrificial. But it has to be meat. Now, by the way, when it comes to birds, there is no part of the birds that a Yisrael will eat. But a chatos bird, some of it a kohen will eat. So even though the kohen is eating the sacrifice of the chatos, a part of the bird, even if a kohen or a Yisrael is eating some part of the shirayim of the menachos, has nothing to do with simcha. Simcha, meat. Simcha, not bread. Simcha, not chicken.
Rabbi, what about just having a steak? Nothing to do with a carbon. Is that simcha?
So nowadays, without doubt, that having a steak over Yom Tov is a fulfillment of simcha. But when the Beis Hamikdash stood and you are there anyways, then it should be sacrificial, and we'll have that sugya in the Gemara a bit later. Okay, says the Gemara.
Rabbi, in simcha elevasur yayin does not include chicken?
Does not include chicken. Thank you, David. That's exactly what we're saying. Meat. Well. Says the Gemara, again, the first din of the Mishnah was that oilas re'iyah has to come from chulin. But why did the Rabbeinu HaKadosh add the word chalamayit? Moyed was striking about oilas only by moyed. Who the voice chulin? Only if you woke up on chalamayit. Do you then have to bring it only from chulin and not from Ma'aser Sheni? But is Rebbe trying to imply you can buy it from Ma'aser Sheni money? No, you may not. Why would you be allowed? There's an obligation to bring an oilas re'iyah, and the rule is that any davar shebechayva, any obligatory matter, can only be fulfilled if you are using otherwise unconsecrated funds. If funds are already consecrated, they may not be used in the fulfillment of another obligation. And the kitema, if maybe the reason why Rebbe wrote the word chalamayit is to tell you something else. That the oil can only be brought on moyed, on chalamayit, but the Yom Tov and boys, chevra beitzom. Let's go back. On Yom Tov is like Shabbos. There's one heter by Yom Tov. The Torah says, asher yeyachel l'chol nefesh hu levada yeyasa lochem. In Parshas Boy, that's called oichel nefesh. Any activity that is needed for food-related matters are allowed to be done on Yom Tov, even if it involves something that otherwise would be a violation of Malach. Now, eating means you're eating. Carbon oil by default is not eaten by anyone, not even by the kohen, which is why Beis Shammai holds that you may never bring an oil re'iyah on Yom Tov. Now, parenthetically, even according to Beis Shammai, there are certain sacrifices that are in the category of oila, according to Beis Shammai, that are brought on Yom Tov. For example, the Talmud. Now, that we learned in Psachim and that we learned in other places, that whenever the Torah ascribes the concept of bimoi adoi, that this should be brought in its appointed time, and it's a communal carbon, communal bimoi adoi, even the Kula Alma overrides Shabbos. No, but you bring an oilas tamid on Shabbos, you can bring it on Yom Tov. But we're speaking about the oilas re'iyah. And indeed, interestingly, Beis Shammai holds a shlonim can be brought. The Shalmei Chagiga was brought on the first day, because since the owners eat some of it, the kohanim eat some of it, then it justifies the chilul. Otherwise, chilul, just shechting is an act of chilul Yom Tov. One of the lamatas malachas is shchita, whether it's because of tzeveya, right? whatever the Isser is going to be. However, Oila, maybe our Mishnah is ascribing to the concept Moy because you just can't bring it. That can't be because Kaman ke Beishamai. Then are you telling me that this anonymous Mishnah is following Beishamai? That's not accepted. We always quote their arguments, but we never paskin like Beishamai. And as we learned, we had this in Beitza. We had this in the Gila. Beishamai yoimin in Midvi and Shlomim, but on Yom Tiv, you can only bring a Shlomim, Shalmei Chagiga. Another detail. Many korbanos, prior to you shechting it, the owner, if the owner is a man, the owner has to be soymech, smicha. He has to lean on the animal with both of his hands, with all of his might, and either say words of praise or say confession if it's a sin type of offering. Now, rabbinically, you may not lean on an animal because you're not allowed to ride an animal because he might rip a branch. And here the question is, are you allowed to do smicha on a shlamim? Now, if smicha is something that is essential, if you can do shchita, then you can do smicha. But in many cases, there's no shvus in the Beis HaMikdash. But as we also learned a lot at the end of Eruvin, it's not a hard and fast rule that there are no rabbinic rules in the Beis HaMikdash. Beis Shammai holds that smicha doesn't have to be done right before shchita. So Beis Shammai holds, do smicha erev Yom Tiv, and do the shchita on Yom Tiv. So even the shlamim, you can't do smicha. Oilos bechlal cannot be brought. Because the Torah doesn't use the words bimoy adoi when it comes to my oilas re'iyah. Beisilol oimrim, they argue with both. First of all, not only can you bring a shlamim, but even an oilah can be brought. And number two, Beisilol subscribes to the rule that taketh smicha shchita, that right after smicha you got to do shchita, can't do smicha out of Yom Tiv. Since you can shecht it, you can do smicha before. So again, don't tell me that Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote the words Bamoyed because this Mishnah follows Beis Shammai. We don't do that. This Mishnah is following Beis Hillel. So therefore, the correct understanding of the Mishnah is Chasure Mechsere V'Hachi Ketani. This is the way you should read the Mishnah. Oilos, with personal oilos, Nedarim and Nedavis. That means all types of karbanos that are not Yom Tov related. I made a vow. Today, I'm bringing a carbon. And guys, if you remember in Rosh Hashanah, we had a 5-way machlokes tanoim. At what point will I violate thou shall not delay? I got to bring it. I'm coming anyways to Yerushalayim for any Yom Tov. I'm going to bring my pledged karbanos. These karbanos, even according to Beis Hillel, cannot be brought on Yom Tov. They can only be brought Bamoyed. Bamoyed boys be Yom Tov ain't boys. That's rule number one. Rule number two, oilas re'iyah, since we paskin like Beis Hillel, that can come even on Yom Tov. That's step number one. And now, when you bring the oilas re'iyah even on Yom Tov, oilas re'iyah can only come from chol. On the other hand, shalmei simcha, bo'in af min ha-meiser, they can come from meiser sheni money, like the Mishnah says. They can come from the Darim and the Davos and Meiser Behema and for the Kohanim, no problem. Chagigas Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach. Again, why Pesach? We'll get there in a moment. That is where we have a machlokes. Beis Shammai holds it also has to come only from Chulin, like the oilas re'iyah. Beis Hillel min ha-meiser means some of it can come from Meiser Sheni money. Now this is the Gemara's conclusion. Now later they found a brayso that explicitly said it so, and indeed Tanya Nami Hachi that oilos nedarim unedavis, ba'mo'id boys, but beyond of ein boys b'chlal. Number two, oilas re'iyah, we paskin like Beis Hillel that ba'a afilu b'yomtiv. And now our topic is: can you use meiser sheni money for it or not? Shiba einaba minachulin elaminachulin. This concept is so meaningful. No, it's don't kill two birds with one stone. We don't do that. You want to bring a carbon, make it special, out of pocket, new money, unconsecrated money. Shalmei Simcha, however, by Shalmei Simcha, again, Shalmei Simcha can come even mina meiser, meanings complete meiser sheni money. And Chagiga Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, again, the question is, why are we mentioning Pesach? Beishamai yoimrim min ha'chulen, Beisilol oimrim min ha'meiser. We're going to stop over here. And we have to clarify two things.
What about the Koren Pesach?
What about a Koren Pesach? Very good example. A carbon Pesach, tzvika, cannot come from my Sheni money. It's any obligation that I have can only come from unconsecrated funds. Like we mentioned, Bekitzer, that this is a halacha l'maisa topic. That, first of all, the Mashiach is coming today, but I'm saying the great question everyone asks is, can I use my Meiser Ksofa money for tuition? That is this topic. The premise, how do you apply it? There's going to be some nuance. But the rule is that anything that I am biblically obligated to do, I can only do from unconsecrated funds. Anything that I'm not biblically obligated to do, even though I undertook that obligation upon myself anyways, here there's a lot more room for leniency.
So Shalmei Simcha is different than
Shalmei Simcha is
Koren
different.
Pesach is a shlamim.
I'll tell you why, because God really did not tell me to bring a sacrifice for Shalmei Simcha. God told me, be happy. And ain't Simcha el b'basar. It's like a whole building. And when you're in Yerushalayim, what stam basar, a sacrificial meat. That's what Danny pointed out before. We're going to see clearly you can fulfill Simcha anyway. And I'll tell you more than that. If there is an individual that doesn't enjoy meat, they don't get Simcha from meat. They don't eat meat. There's no chiyuv of eating meat. For Simcha, Shalmei Chagiga, I don't care whether I like meat or not. I have an obligation to bring a Shalmei Chagiga. And I'm going to eat some of that meat. So Simcha is different. Since the mitzvah Simcha, I could tap into other meats that are there from other obligations. Elyahu follows the rule. It's a choiv. You got to bring it out of pocket. Why would Beis Hillel change his this concept or give an exception by Shalmei Chagiga? That is where we're at. But before that, we have to clarify why Pesach. These karbanis are related to all of the Yom Tovim. So God willing, a lot more to be continued.
Rabbi, the Nedarim and Nedavais that we're talking about that you can't bring on Yom Tov, that's Dafka and Oila, right? If you had a neder to bring a shlamim, then that, I guess you would be allowed to bring on Yom Tov, right? Because the whole concept is that the entire thing is going to the Eibush.
Danny, you're so right. The Braisa says, Oilois Nedavim Nedavais. Yeah, shlamim means if I'm eating it, of course I can bring it. If I can eat it, not carbon, of course carbon. Can you just remind me, what's the minimum share of a lulav? Right? Is it 3 tvachim, 4 tvachim? It's we had a Mishnah in Sukkah, right? It's a tefach. I think it's 4 tvachim, a tefach, and then the 3 tvachim kedei l'ranua should shake. Anyways, but that's an important club before we run on. All of the Rishonim ask, every mitzvah has no shiur. And the answer is no. Elam shiur means that almost all mitzvahs, when you do more, you're not adding to the mitzvah. You can add, but you're not adding to the mitzvah. Like I mentioned, the height of a mitzvah, the size of a mitzvah. These
Rabbi, 4 tvachim.
4 tvachim, thank you. Elam shiur means that the more you do, the greater mitzvah you get. But you're not obligated to do more. Okay. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Chagiga Daf Ches. We left off on Daf Zayin, Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. We are in middle of the sugya that we started in the Mishnah regarding buying Shalmei Chagiga with already consecrated Meiser Sheni funds. And even though everyone subscribes to the rule that Kol Davar Shebechoiva Ein Rabah Ela Min HaChulin, for some reason, Beis Hillel says that some of the money you're using to buy the animal of Chagiga could come from Meiser Sheni money. We have to explain why is that. Before that, the Gemara is going to address why did Rebbe in the Mishnah focus on the first day of Pesach, when really our topic is not Pesach related, it's Regalim related, and that's going to bring us back to the sugya we had in Psachim regarding another Chagiga that sometimes is brought on the 14th day of Nisan, as we'll explain in a moment, connected to the Korban Pesach. Now, we're going to have throughout Shas, there was really a question when it comes to quality and quantity, kamus and echus. And this is something that the Rebbe really caught him. And the Rebbe strongly opined that kamus is machria echus. Is if you have to pick quantity and quality, the Rebbe held that even in quantity, there comes a point when there is so much quantity, it ups the quality. Really, that was connected to the ending of brachas, to Sinai and Oiker Harim. But we're gonna just share how some of the achronim understand a lot of our topics concerning adding money to the Chagiga from Ma'aser Sheni over the Chulin, connected, as we'll see beautifully, to the concept of whether Kamus is Machriya or whether Echus is Machriya. Chagiga Daf Ches will address in greater detail the mitzvah of the Samachta B'Chagecha. And again, as we just spoke it out in the last class, the Samachta B'Chagecha is not exclusive to eat sacrificial meat. It's a much broader obligation of having joy that we fulfill by having sacrificial meat, but it includes a lot more than just eating the meat of kachim. When there's no yet temple, pre-third temple, we still are obligated and we can fulfill the Samachta B'Chagecha, as we'll speak out different statements from Chazal. Now, on Daf Ches, we're going to learn another Mishnah that's going to speak about circumstances where a person is going to bring many karbanos chagiga. And even though we learned on Daf Zayin, we introduced this concept of Rabbi Yechanan and Shlakish, the concept of Baal Toisef. So just to reiterate, when we appeared on the first time, ideally on the first day of Yom Tiv, and you fulfilled your obligation of Oil and Chagiga, and then you're going to reappear. Here is where you might have an issue that when you reappear, mitzvah, harayim. How many times should you come to the temple? The more, the better. You don't bring karbanos. If you were to bring a korban according to Rabbi Yechanan, you're violating thou shalt not add. But when you bring the karbanos the first time, even though we learned in the first Mishnah a very small amount of money, even rabbinically, Basil says that the oil can even be worth only one ma'ah, a sixth of a dinar. Chagiga, a third of a dinner. But if you want, you can bring many oilos and many chagigas, as the Mishnah will describe. We're going to learn a little bit about if a person designated many animals, and for whatever reason they didn't bring it the first time they appeared. Can they bring it tomorrow or not? We'll see what will be the issue and a lot more. Without any further ado, let's dive right into it. This is pure kachim. There's a special geschmack in our Gemara, and we're going to link ultimately the whole Daf Ches to the topic of learning Chitas and Rambam. What should someone do if they missed out a day? How do you compensate? Can you lechatchila miss out to compensate? This is going to be a very relevant topic to us as well. So 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Zayin Amud Beis. First of all, asks the Gemara, why did the Rebbe, speaking about the question whether you can use Ma'aser Sheni money for Chagiga, why did he speak about Pesach? Chagiga's Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkos. Ravashi, Rebbe is already hinting to another rule. By inference, Hakomash Malon, Chagiga's Chamisha Asar in Halkap. In means yes. Yes means no. Here, that's classic in the Gemara. That only the Chagiga that you have to bring on the 15th, the Chagiga of Yom Tiv, yes, meaning don't bring it from Chulin. Has to be from it must be from Chulin. Don't bring it from Ma'aser Sheni. But the Chagiga that you bring on the 14th, loy, no means yes. No means this rule doesn't apply. You can bring it fully from Ma'aser Sheni money. So let's quickly recap. We learned in Pesach a phenomenal thing. The mitzvah of Korban Pesach, the Korban that is brought, there's a catch over here. On one hand, it's the most limited korban in the sense that we have to eat it up until midnight. Normally, a shlamim you have 2 days and 1 night. Here you shecht it. You shecht it on Erev Pesach. You cannot eat it at Erev Pesach. You can only eat it at night. And we know it's not just eating it. There's a whole mitzvah of Haggadah. Like today is Seder. That means by the time you begin eating the meal, you're already near midnight. And God says, now whether you can eat it beyond midnight biblically or rabbinically, but even if it's only rabbinically, you can only eat it until midnight. Not only, so how do you do that? So you have to have many people counted on the korban. And with all the pratim, prior to slaughtering it, So you have to know how to look at an animal and figure out everyone has to have at least a kazayas. But let's get 50 people in our group. Very nice. So you're sure that when we're going to eat it, so many people are eating it, it's going to be fully consumed. There's a challenge. It's ideal to eat Korban Pesach al hasoiva. Al hasoiva means when you eat it, it should make you feel satisfied. We're not speaking about achila gasa, which is after you're satisfied. For people who Nebuch cannot help themselves and there's food, they eat it. That's not called eating. That's disgusting. That's no mitzvah, especially if a person is very full and they feel not good by eating. But you should eat it till your satisfaction. But how do you do that? If you have so many people involved, you're only going to get a little piece. So as an option, you brought another chagiga on the 14th. This is not connected to Yom Tov. Now, the beauty is that this chagiga, you don't have to finish by midnight. So you had two sacrifices in front of you on the Seder plate. You had the chagiga of Yud Dalid, and then you had the Korban Pesach. And you would eat the chagiga until you're almost satisfied, and then you would eat the Korban Pesach al hasoiva. Now, it's not obligatory, meaning that if for whatever reason our group is a small number relative to the animal, but we know what we're doing. And we say, no. Everyone is just going to have the Pesach and everyone is going to have 3 steaks and we're going to get satisfied. That's okay. As long as you don't eat too much, you're good. But most people didn't do that. To make sure they finished the Pesach by midnight, they invited many people on the same animal. Everyone was only going to get the small amount and they would bring a chagiga. Now, this chagiga, that's what the Rebbe is hinting to, doesn't have to come from chulin. Very much like B'samachta b'chagecha. There's no chiyuv. Really, if you remember, when we learned the Psachim, there's a whole machloikas, whether there's a chiyuv. Actually, we learned the machloikas Tanoim. Some Tanoim hold the chagiga is like the Korban Pesach. Chagiga Yud Daled can only be eaten until midnight. You have all those opinions. That's not our sugya. So let's read it inside. Alma Daf Ches on the top, that our Mishnah holds by making a statement which implies that the chagiga that people opted to bring on the 14th could come from Ma'aser Sheni, chagiga sarba asalav doiraiso, because those who held in Psachim Daf Ayin and in other places that you are obligated to bring a chagiga on the 14th, and it's mamish like the Korban Pesach. We learned shitas, it has to be from the same animal type, and you can only eat it until midnight, and you can't break its bones. All the dinim are the same. Well, if it's a chiyuv, then you got the same problem. Rebbe doesn't subscribe to that. It's optional. Therefore, that's why he's emphasizing that the chagiga of the first day of Pesach cannot come, according to Bishamai, at all from Ma'aser Sheni. But on the 14th it could. Okay, now let's understand the machlokes proper. Amar Ma, the second line from the top, Beis Hillel holds that the chagiga could come from Ma'aser, meaning Ma'aser Sheni. Guys, remember a klal. Whenever you learn in Gemara Ma'aser means Ma'aser Sheni. If we're speaking about Ma'aser Rishon, we're going to spell it out. If we're speaking about Ma'aser Behema, we're going to spell out Ma'aser Behema. This is the rule. Ma'aser Sheni. Why will we still allow it? Then are we not saying bringing a chagiga is a obligation, right? As it is oilas re'iyah. So the answer is clear. Ula gives the word. This word has to be unpackaged. The answer is Beis Hillel doesn't mean you can buy the whole animal from Ma'aser Sheni money. No, Beis Hillel means betoifel. You're supplementing. If a minimum amount comes from chulin and you want to add Ma'aser Sheni money, you are allowed to do that. But that has to be clarified. And let me tell you 2 ways of understanding supplements. And we already gave a heads up that on Amud Beis, we're going to learn that even according to those who subscribe to the concept of Baal Toisef, that once you brought these obligations, don't come again and bring more. That's only if you already fulfilled your obligation on the first day. But on the first time you appear, you can bring many animals. And people that came with large families, they needed to bring a lot of korbanos, chagiga, for everyone to have a piece of the chagiga. So teifel can either mean that I'm using a minimum amount of chulin money, Now, what's the minimum amount? Let's use the logic. What did we learn in the first Mishnah? What does Beis Hillel hold? That the minimum amount of a carbon should have the worth of 2 ma'ah. Okay, with 2 ma'ah, I can buy a little shepsela. But can I honor the family, the emek here? So now, since I'm spending the minimum amount from chulin money, either I can add my sasheni money to buy a larger animal, so I'm supplementing it one animal, partially from funds of chulin, partially from my sasheni, or, but ula means to say teufel, one animal has to be fully chulin. If I want to add meat, bring another animal, bring another 2 animals, bring another 50 animals. The added animals can come from my sasheni money. Hest, and let's read it inside. So now there's a machlokes Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan in the statement of Ula. What does teufel mean? What could be supplemented? Chizkiah understands it means teufel behema lebehema. One animal has to be purely chulin, and let's already connect the concept of echos versus kamos. I know that this one animal will be little, but the whole animal, the ganze behema, is going to be from chulin. Now, if you want to add animals, here is where Beis Hillel allows you to add the animals from Ma'aser Sheni funds. But they ain't cliff l'mois l'mois. But if you want to buy one larger animal and you say, you know what, I could have bought a smaller animal. I would have spent the 2 ma. Let me go buy a bigger animal. So let me buy the bigger animal with 2 ma of chulin, and then another $50 for my sasheni money. That we don't allow. We need one animal. The ganze animal has to be purely chulin. Rabbi Yochanan says no, the opposite. That teufel mois l'mois. Buying one animal itself can be bought partially from chulin money and partially from my sasheni money. And if a person is bringing many animals, every one of these animals has to have in it some chulin money and then add my sasheni money. But they ain't teufel behema lebehema. But to have an animal that is fully bought from my sasheni, even if you are also bringing another animal that comes fully from chulin, that you're not allowed to do. And again, like this is the concept of really of kamos, whether kamos is machriya, whether quantity is most important, whether echos is more important. No, it's having an animal, even if it's small, but fully from chulin is something that the Chizkiah doesn't need. Rabbi Yochanan holds the opposite. Rabbi Yochanan holds teufel mois l'mois. No. One animal itself can be bought from a mixture of chulin and ma'aser sheni money. As long as every animal has in it some chulin money, again, the minimum will be the 2 ma'ah, then you can add ma'aser sheni money. But you can never have a full animal, you can never have a full animal that is bought from ma'aser sheni money. Just get Rabbi Yochanan. We're good on this. Amazing. Now, what we will see on Amud Beis is that the Rav Sheshes holds that when Ula said teufel, he meant both. But right now, it's either or. So Chizkiah says that you can never supplement money. Chizkiah needs the echos. He needs to have one animal that is fully. And Rabbi Yochanan, no. Doesn't need to have one animal that's fully. The opposite. He wants for every animal to have in it a little bit of chulin money. Every animal should have a little bit of chulin money. We have a brisa that appears to take the side and to be the base of Chizkiah. When it says in Parshas Re'eh regarding the karbanis that we bring on Yom Tov, that pasuk happens to be in the holiday of Shavuos. So the pasuk writes, "Va'asisa chag Shavuos l'Hashem Elokecha." Then the words are misas nidvas yotcha. The word misas means a tribute. The word misas says the Chazal melamed she'adam maybe chayvasim in achulin. A tribute also means before your tribute it was unconsecrated. You're making a tribute. How do you know that you could supplement to the money? That's the price over here. And Ma'aser Sheni money comes from the produce that we grew in our fields. Ma'aser Sheni money is money from God's blessings. So God writing in that parsha, Kasher Yivarechecha, is hinting that we can supplement to the money, Ma'aser Sheni money. Mamish like Rabbi Yechanan. We can't bring an animal that's fully from Ma'aser Sheni, but we can bring, every animal can be part this and part that. Chizkiah, who holds mamish the opposite, also quoting the word misas. Misas means melamed she'adam maybe chavasim in achulin. A tribute means that it's coming from chulin, from out of your pocket. That's why it's called a tribute, a misas. Beshama yoimrim yoim rishon min achulin. Indeed, yoim rishon means shalmei chagiga, like we learned in our Mishnah, has to be fully chulin. Bekan ve'elach, that means simcha can come completely from Ma'aser Sheni. Beis says that achila rishoina min achulin, the first achila, right, which means the first animal of Shalmei Chagiga, which means that if you're bringing various korbanos, that's the way he's understanding it, various korbanos, ul Shalmei Chagiga, the first of the animals has to be fully min achulin. Kan ve'elach min ha'maiser. Once you are adding to the Shalmei Chagiga, then you can add animals that are bought only from Ma'aser Sheni money. As long as you have one animal that's fully chulin money. Now, u'sh'ar kol yemais ha'pesach, or sukkos. Here again, we're going back to the Shalmei Simcha, Adam Yoitzi Dechavasai, with even Ma'aser Behema, or as we learned in the Mishnah, or with a kohen with a bechar, or a kohen with a chazay and shaykh, because Shalmei Simcha means be besimcha. And if I'm having taka, obligatory sacrificial meat, but I'm having simcha. Now, the Yom Tov, my Tamaloi, here comes another question, and that is that since according to Beis Hillel, according to this understanding, once you bring one animal of Chagiga that is bought fully from chulin money, if you are bringing 2 Chagigas or 10 Chagigas, you can bring many other animals. It's called Tiflin, right? Behema, the Behema. You can bring other animals from Ma'aser Sheni money. So hold on. Am I allowed to bring other animals from Ma'aser Behema? Why not? If you're telling me that once one animal is chulin, if I add to the Chagiga, I can add it from otherwise consecrated money, then why would I not be allowed also to add the additional animals, the Tiflin Behema lebehema, from Ma'aser Behema? And the Mishnah seems to imply not. Ma'aser Behema is only used for Simcha. Ma'aser Behema will not be used the first day. And indeed, you may not bring Ma'aser Behema the first day, not even as Tiflin. Why not? Because if you would be allowed to add to the Chagiga from Ma'aser Behema, you might end up separating this 10th animal on Yom Tiv. And what will be the problem with that? The EFshin. You may not separate the 10th Ma'aser Behema animal on Yom Tiv. Farvas. Now we do know a rabbinic rule. There's a rabbinic rule. You can't be mekadosh an animal on Shabbos and Yom Tiv, right? But here there's a biblical problem. What's the biblical problem? Is that mishum siknasa, because you have to dye the animal with red dye. And dyeing the back of an animal is a biblical violation. So Chazal said that you may not separate Ma'aser Behema on Yom Tiv, which is why the Mishnah, and a person will say, no, I already separated before, but that's the Gezerah. If someone will bring a Ma'aser Behema, even though they already did it before, someone else might do it on Yom Tiv. I heard a great story that Rab Nachum Chernobyl had on his back a red mark, a big red mark. And he said that in his previous Gilgulim, in his first Gilgul, he was from the animals of Yaakov Avinu, and he was the Ma'aser Behema, and Yaakov Avinu painted his back of the Shepsele red, and that's why Begashmias and that Gilgul, imagine, he had a red mark on his back. How great is that? Okay. Says the Gemara, my mashma, how does this brayso understand from the word misas, which means a tribute, that it means it's coming from chulin? Where do we see that from in scripture? Because it says in the Megillah, by Yosem HaMelech Achashverosh Mas Ala Aretz, that he imposed taxes. When a government is imposing a tax, they want new money of yours. Think about it. You can't give money that you already need to give to the government as taxes to kill two birds with one stone. Halavai, but you can't do that. So just like when you are being musked from the government, it's a new tax means if your money is being now taken by the government. When Hashem uses the word misas, he means money that prior to you giving it is completely unconsecrated funds. Okay, then the Mishnah said again more regarding the Shalmei Simcha, that Yisrael Yotzim Yedei Chavasan, that we can fulfill our obligation of V'samachta B'chagecha by bringing karbanos that are in the category of Nadarim and Nadavis, karbanos that were you pledged throughout the year, karbanos that you are mechuyev to bring anyways. So what? But now that you brought it and now that you're eating the meat, then you're doing the simcha. Oh, so here's my question, Chadra. The person's wife, you have an anniversary, you have a birthday, you are going to buy a gift to your wife anyways. Can you give that gift before Yom Tov? That's really the topic. According to the Gemara, you could, because I okay, but you gave it over Yom Tov. That's a good application. I'm not saying you should do that, and for all the women, you deserve to get 2 gifts and 10 gifts.
Oh, you have to add to it. You have to add to it.
Why here you don't have to add? Then here you don't have to add. If I made so many vows throughout the year that I'm going to have to fulfill my vows every day, I'll have a new carbon. I don't have to bring any new carbon for v'samachta b'chagecha. I'm going to have sacrificial meat every day.
All right, I think it's a bit typo. I think you got to do a little typo over here.
There's no typo here. All right, Danny's wife is listening.
No, tyfel. That's the word that Ula used, right? You have to add. Tyfel. You have to add.
No, Danny. You're talking about Shalmei Chagiga. We moved on already. I'm talking about Shalmei Simcha. Shalmei Simcha, no teufel. Shalmei Simcha, no teufel. Buying jewelry for your wife is a chiyuv nowadays for Simcha, not from Chagiga. So I'm saying if a person is mechuyev to give his wife a gift anyways because of whatever, if you give it before Yom Tov, can you fulfill your obligation? Yes, that's what we're learning. And it says in Parshas Re'evis, so from here we learn, these are the words. Clear. In other words, first of all, the simcha is simcha is an emotion. The Torah doesn't specify a specific path to get that simcha. Which take, why Chazal say that when there's no Beis Hamikdash, ein simcha el b'basar u'b'yayin, not kosher, not sacrificial, and whether it's v'samachta b'chagecha a chiyuv on the women, or whether we just had this a few daf ago, v'simachta b'chagecha, that isha baila misamcha, that a man is mechuyev to make his wife happy. The Gemara says not with meat and not with wine, but with a big day tzivayim and tachshitin. That's also the samachta b'chagecha, because that's how you're going to be happy. A woman is going to wear a new garment. She's going to get new jewelry. She's going to be b'simcha. Well, and so no, since it's not specific to sacrificial meat, mikan amru chachamim, that Yisrael yotzim yedei chavasam, that I can fulfill my mitzvah of simcha by bringing a carbon that anyways I had to bring, but I'm eating the meat, so I'm feeling joy. The nadarim v'nadavis, and my sebehema, and not only that, kohanim can fulfill their obligation with the chatas, which they're getting that meat anyway. The part of the chatas that goes to the kohanim, or the part of the meat from an asham that goes to the kohanim, or the animals that are a bechor animal that are not blemished, that a kohen is bringing as a carbon, as ideally he should when there's a Beis Hamikdash, and the chazay and the shoik that he gets from every carbon shlom. So Yachol, you would think now that the Braisa says v'samachta b'chagecha is l'rabois kol mini simachos l'simcha. Oh, kol mini simcha is what happens if I'm going to have chicken, and I get joy from chicken, or if I have mincha, a carbon mincha. Nisht. No, because it says v'samachta b'chagecha. Now the emphasis now will be from the words chagiga. Here, chagiga, we just quoted this in last daf. By chagiga, by the Shalmei Chagiga, it says lois yolin chelev chagi aboichet. The Torah specifies details about the fats of the chagiga. From there we know that chagiga can only be an animal. So since it says v'samachta bechagecha chaps chagecha misha chagiga b'mehem, only an animal that is good for a chagiga, which is an animal, not a bird, not flower, that is to be used for simcha. Yatsu elu she'ein chagiga b'mehem. So there's a scriptural source. Rav Ashi says I don't need a scriptural source. I can learn it from the word simcha. Simcha from chicken, there's no such a thing. Simcha from flour, simcha from meat without a chagecha. V'samachta yatsu elu v'samachta nafka. Learn it from the word v'samachta. Yatsu elu she'ein behem mishum simcha. How great is that? Once to be fully satisfied, to fully rejoice with eating is a pshita, according to Rav Ashi, is connected to meat. And if you think otherwise, zos to wissen that das balabatam hepach das toira. Simcha is meat. Only thing is that according to Rav Ashi, he doesn't even need the word chagiga. So what does he do with the word chagiga? But Rav Ashi, hi bechagecha, it should say the samachta. What's bechagecha? My ovidlay? We already had this above. We're going back to Moed Cotton. We're going back to you can engage, you can make a halachic engagement, but you can't make a wedding on Chol HaMoed. The Amar Rab Daniel Bar, the humble Katina, in the name of Rav, from where do we know in Scripture that we may not do a marriage? The Nesuyin on Chol HaMoed, right? Moed Cotton Daf Ches. If I remember correctly, we had 4 sources for that. This is just one of them. And the word chagecha comes to exclude v'loi v'ishtecha. And as we explained over there, that when you focus on one, automatically you disconnect from the other. That's the way God made all of us. Even people that think they can multi function or multi whatever the word is. No. So the samachta bechagecha. Stay focused on the chag, and that's the I missed that yakir. All right, weiter. Good. So here we go. Weiter. Dinim and kachim. Mi sheyesh lo yoichle merubim. If a person has many dependents that came with him on Yom Tov to the Beis Hamikdash, and before we come to the Simcha, we're beginning with the Shalmei Chagiga. Says the Mishnah, and if unachasim mu'atim, but if his funds are relatively limited, and he has to decide one shlamim won't be enough because the shlamim has to be consumed, not like the Pesach until midnight, but it has to be consumed over 2 days. So he maybe shlamim, he's going to bring many shlamims because he has many people. You got to bring many shlamims. The oilois mu'atois. And if he doesn't have enough money to bring more than the minimum amount of an oila, and again, according to Beis Hillel, he can buy an oila even by spending only 1 ma'ah, fine. Spend the lesser amount of money, only buy 1 oila, and use the other money, use your budget for the shlamim because you have many people, and again, we want from them to eat over the next 2 days the carbon from Chagiga. What happens if nesachim merubim, if a person is blessed with wealth, they have a lot of money, but not that many people are going to be eating. That's what I meant to Pesach. So even though you don't have to eat it until midnight, but you have to eat the carbon over next 2 days. You don't have enough people in the family if you were to bring many carbonos. You would want to bring the minimum oil. You know why? Because because God blessed you. You want to bring many oilos. And neshamot, even though we learned on Daf Zayin at the end that Rabbi Yochanan holds, once you did the oilas re'iyah properly once, then when you reappear, you don't bring more, but the once doesn't mean a little carbon. If you are wealthy, bring many oilos. Then indeed, maybe oilos merubais, spend the bulk of your money designated for these sacrifices on oilos, and only get shlamim muatim, because you have to be careful. If you don't eat up the meat of a carbon chevra, then you're violating nicer. It's not stam, I want to be generous, you got to eat it. If a person, God forbid, right now is limited, so then that's what the Hillel was referring to in the first Mishnah, that ma'a kesef for the oila and shtei kesef for the chagiga. And again, David Hamami asked, and that's such a small amount of money. Like there's a minimum amount of money that people need. That's part of the mitzvah. You have a lot of money. and you have a lot of dependents. Two blessings. Because Ashir is the Hayom Yom. Jewish wealth is not golden houses. Jewish wealth is a big family. That's wealth. So Zeh v'Zeh. So Al Zeh Nemar, Ish Kamatnas Yadoi. Kebirchas Hashem Alekecha Asher Nasan Lach. And bring as many oilers as you want. And bring as many shlamim that you can project. Won't come to noise. Okay, beautiful mission. Says the Gemara, shlamim merubim meheicha ma'aseh. In other words, if a person doesn't have money, modern Kedushin begins kasav minolan. I know in a different context. Holesle, what should he do? Hatish can get. And he has a lot of people whom he has to feed. And everyone should have a part of the Chagiga. So there, Amar Abchizda, okay, everyone had some Meiser Sheni money. We paskin like Besilo. What was the topic we learned in last daf, the second sugya? That even though the minimum amount of money of the Chagiga has to come in Achulin, but you can be trifle, you can add, supplement. So trifle or maybe pargadol. Rabbi Chizda uses the case of you buying one animal, that's Rabbi Yechanan, remember? And the one animal, you have a little bit of money, spend the 2 mal, you spend the minimum amount, and then buy a large animal, which would suffice to give everyone in your family a little bit of the Chagiga, and that money anyways you have with you for Meiser Sheni. Amalei Rab Sheshes, why are you speaking about supplementing Meiser Sheni money to Chulin money and buying one large animal? Harei Amru Teiflin Behema LeBehema. Rab Sheshes is saying you could use 2 ma'al to buy a exclusively Chulin Chagiga, and then you can use Meiser Sheni money to buy just another Chagiga fully from Meiser Sheni. So the Gemara says, what was Rab Shesh's problem? So Gemara clarifies, if you are, what was bothering Rab Shesh's, and he made a comment on Rab Chizda. And really, we learned above, Machlokes Rabbi Yechanan and Chizkiah, now we're going to revisit it. So the Gemara says, if you will interpret the objection that Rab Shesh's had was, if he is taking that side and he holds that you may not buy one animal from a mixture of monies, so then he should have used the words that we had on Amud Aleph. He should have told them, Ein toiflin mois lemois. So Ella, the Gemara clarifies, this is what Rab Sheshes means to tell Rab Chizda. I agree with your option. Yes, you are allowed to supplement and add for one animal, not only using money from Chulin to buy a smaller one, but add Meiser Sheni money and buy one larger animal. Rab Sheshes is saying that I agree with both Rabbi Yechanan and Chizkiah. In other words, you have both options. You are also allowed to supplement, not by adding to the money of one animal, but you can bring various animals, one only from Chulin and all the others from Meiser Sheni. In other words, Rab Sheshes holds you have both options. So the Gemara is pointing out, well, Oy Bazoi, not he subscribes to Chizkiah, nor he subscribes to Rabbi Yechanan. Now, why would that be a problem? I'll tell you why that might be a problem. Because on Amud Aleph, we learned 2 brises, if you remember. Tanya Kavasa de Rabbi Yechanan, Tanya Kavasa de Chizkiah, or whatever the Seder of the Gemara was first. Tanya Kavasa de Chizkiah, Tanya Kavasa de Rabbi Yechanan. Then the Gemara brought the brisa first of Rabbi Yechanan. Now, these 2 brises, if the brises themselves only allow for one of the 2 options, then we have a problem with Rab Sheshes, because then he would be arguing with both brises. So are you going to tell me that the chitema that Rab Sheshes understands the argument only between Amoraim, but masniyasa loy pligi, but the brises don't subscribe to only either one or the other? The brises will allow for both. It doesn't appear that way. For Haktani, it says in the Braisa that Achila Rashena has to be fully Menachulin, which L'cho'ura should mean that you don't have both options. It's either supplementing animals, only supplementing money, but not both. So the Gemara clarifies that the Rab Sheshes understands the Braisa, my Achila Rashena, not that one animal has to fully come Menachulin. It means that you can supplement. One animal should be bought from both chulin and from Ma'aser Sheni. But what was never spoken out inside, I know I repeated it, but that was from here. When you speak about supplementing it, okay, what is the minimum amount of money that has to come min hachulin? That is what Rab Sheshes is being understanding the Braisa. Since Beis Hillel holds that a Chagiga animal has to have the value of 2 ma'ah, that's the minimum. In other words, shiur the may achila rishayna. If you were only to buy the minimum amount of animal, how much must it be worth 2 ma'ah? That has to come in achulim. And if you're supplementing it, the Braisa, like Rab Sheshes holds that you have an option of buying a larger animal and adding on top of the 2 ma'ah, putting in the same pot money from Ma'aser Sheni and buying again one animal, either or. There's an either or option. Says the Gemara. Amar Ula. Starting a new topic. Amar Shlakish. Kifrish eser behemus l'chagigos. As we learned in the Mishnah, if a person has what we call oichlin merubin, that means God blessed you with a large family, you want for everyone to have the opportunity and the mitzvah to eat some of the shalmei chagiga, you got to buy. Again, here the buy is not one big animal, but you bought 10 animals. So the question is, if you only brought 5 on the first day, are you allowed to bring 5 on the second day? Says Reish Lakish, says Reish Lakish, Chayzero Makrev Chamish B'Yom Tov Sheni. You can bring on the second day. That's the chiddush. What's the novelty? Again, Bal Toisif says Rashi. Don't say you're adding. You're not adding. You're not. Why am I not adding? Because from the outset, I designated 10 animals. I only brought 5 on the first day. I'll bring 5 on the second day. Now, by the way, there's a big advantage to doing that. What is the advantage? That since Shlomim, they have an expiration date, which is 2 days and 1 night. If I would have brought all 10 on the first day, then I would only have from this meat, day 1 of Yom Tov, day 2 of Yom Tov. Day 3 onwards, I would have to bring other korbanos. It can be from Chayva, or to do the Simcha. When I spread it out, so then I had 5 today. The 5 that I slaughter tomorrow has now another day in which I can eat it, in which I'll fulfill also the Simcha. I'm allowed to do that. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, Kivin Shepasak, you designated 10. You didn't bring the 10. You stopped after 5. Shuv Einai Makrev, you no longer are allowed to bring. Now, this sounds so similar to the machlekes we had on Daf Zayin. Because Rabbi Yochanan is more sensitive to Baal Tosef. Clarifies the Gemara, it's not the way it sounds. Amar Rabbi Abba, I want to tell you that here they are really not even arguing. Each side agrees with the other. Veloy pligim. Kan, when Rabbi Yochanan says that once you brought 5 on the first day, you may not bring the other 5. That's bistam, which means that when you designated the 10 animals, you didn't specify how you want to bring them. We're going to clarify this a little bit more in a moment. You bought them stam. You will magdish them stam. You brought 5 today, you can't bring 5 tomorrow. Kan, when a shlakish allows you to bring on the other day, that's b'mefarish. B'mefarish means that if when you brought the 10, you said, I am bringing this on the first day. You bought it to be brought on the first day. Something happened and you were unable to bring it. Since it was designated to be brought on the first day, now you can compensate by bringing it on the second. And a little bit more, and you'll chop it even clearer. Says the Gemara, what does it mean stam? When we said that everyone agrees that stam cannot be brought on the second day. If I didn't specify when I consecrated the animals that I'm going to bring it on the first day, I didn't say that. I brought it stam. And I brought all the 10 to the temple. I brought my animals to the temple. You know why I only brought 5? Because after they slaughtered the first 5, it became sunset. After sunset, or they brought a carbon Talmud, really, after a certain point, you can't bring anymore. There wasn't enough time in the day. The Gemara says that even though you bought it stam, everyone will agree that you can bring the 5 on the other day. Because it's clear that, why was it not brought all 10 on the first day? Because the lakash was bayim. Another detail. The Ella, the lace lay oichlin. I designated 10 animals. I didn't bring all 10 on the first day because I was afraid when I begin to bring, someone told me, you're bringing 10 animals, very nice, you mean well, you want to bring a lot of gifts to God, but don't forget that it has to be eaten over 2 days. How many people are in your family? Will they be able to finish all of it? How many guests can you invite? So he stopped because he was afraid that he can't fully consume it. So here also, what we're getting to is one nakuda, that when I buy many animals for the Chagiga, as long as I had in mind initially to bring it all on the first day, if for external reasons I didn't, everyone agrees it can be brought throughout the Yom Tov. On the second day, on the third day. The only problem of bringing a little bit today and a little bit tomorrow is only if lechatchila I decided to bring some of them tomorrow. That is where there's the problem. And indeed, the case of Stam is I designated 10 animals. I didn't say I'm going to bring it on the first day. I didn't verbalize that. So we have to see from circumstances, why did I not bring all of them? If there was enough time on the first day to bring all of them. If I have such a large family that there is not an issue of me being worried that it's going to come to Noisod after 2 days. And yet I didn't bring it all on the first day. So we understand the parentheses that me, the Bekama, Loy Akrivino, why didn't he bring all 10 on the first day? Shmaminot must be that he deliberately, he lachatchila decided, I'm not bringing all 10. Shayure, he left some today and some tomorrow. And that's not what God wants. Chagiga means that when you appear the first time, bring an island, bring a Chagiga. And you can bring many animals. If you're bringing many animals, lechatchila, bring all of them. If you wanted to bring all of them, you designated to bring all of them, but something externally stopped you, then you can compensate. See, there's compensation, and then there's lechatchila. Lechatchila, you can't divide the Chagiga for 2 days. And as we have the psukim that Rashi brings, there's the word oisoi. Oisoi means the chagoisem oisoi. It's like in the singular. Celebrate with it. It doesn't mean you can't bring more than one animal, but it has to be brought all together. And the Gemara says that this is really not an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. They really agree to each other. Each one is speaking about another scenario. When Novin came from the Holy Land to Bowel, and he further repeated and clarified the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Omar, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, if a person designated 10 animals for his Chagiga, and Rabbi Yochanan appears to be saying the opposite here, and he only brought 5 on the first day, yes, he's allowed to bring 5 on the other day. But Ravin quoted Rabbi Yochanan to say the opposite. And Kashan Adadi, how do you reconcile? It's a contradiction. Elalav Shmamino must be that Kan Bistam, Kan B'Mefarish Shmamino. How great is this? And just to finish, Itmanami, we also learned Amar Rav Shemen Bar Abba again in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Daf Tes, that Lo Yishanu, that Rabbi Yochanan says that if you separated many animals for Chagiga, you didn't bring all of them on the first day, that it's forbidden for you to bring the remainder on the next days. That's only Elo Sheloi Gamar, when you didn't finish. We'll see soon what that means. But if you finished, then Rabbi Yochanan will agree that you could. And what is the finishing? My Gamar, so Ilaim or Gamar Kamanoisav, if finishing means you brought all of them on the first day, then there's nothing to talk about. Then what do you have to bring on the second day? Elo, no. Sheloi Gamar Hayoim. Was if the person, step number 1, if when the person brought the animals, they said, I am sanctifying these 10 animals to be brought on the first day. Everyone agrees that if you did not end up bringing it all on the first day, you can make it up later. Even if you didn't explicitly say that you are going to bring them all on the first day. But circumstantial evidence, which means that you were bringing them, and then at some point they said in the Beis Hamikdash, no more. Now we're going on to the Talmud of the afternoon and Allah Hashlem, and that's it. So if Shaloi Gamar Hayoim, if the day did not stop, if you could have brought all 10, you didn't, you were not Mefaresh, here is where we say, why didn't you finish? The Stama, because Lechatchila, you had in mind to bring some tomorrow. That's not acceptable. The Chagoisam Oisoi, Avol Gamar Hayoim, but if something external stopped you from bringing all 10, which is similar to Mefaresh, then Rabbi Yochanan will agree that that you are allowed to bring whatever you didn't bring the first day on the second day. I want to apply this to the many Limudim, like we have Rambam and Chitas. In other words, I got to learn today's shiur Chitas. What do I do if I didn't finish? If I didn't finish it, I should learn it tomorrow. There's payment, there's tashlumin. But you know what? You know when you say there's tashlumin, when you wanted to learn it today, when you attempted to learn it today, circumstances didn't allow you. That's tashlumin. But lachatchila, to take something that should have been done today and say, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do it tomorrow, man, sometimes that's not okay.
Who does that?
I don't know, Nathaniel. Some people say, I'll learn it tomorrow, leave me alone.
But 1 second, we're talking about 10 chagigas, right? So
Yes.
why can't he lechatchila just split it up and
So lechatchila splitting it up, again, this is linked to the topic we had on Daf Zayin, but not the same. So Rashi holds that when it says by the Chagiga v'chagoisem oisoi chag lashem, not oisom. So actually, without Torah Shebal Peh, you'll say v'chagoisem oisoi, Danny, means you can only bring one carbon. V'chagoisem oisoi. That we don't say. Oisoi doesn't mean that you can only bring one. You can bring as many as you want, as long as people are going to eat it. Oisoi means that carbon chagiga is a one-time thing. By the Oilas Re'iyah, Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, Daf Zayin. Whether you are allowed to bring another Oilas Re'iyah. Everyone holds you don't have to. By Chagiga, it's a one-time carbon. The Chiddush is that a one-time means you bring it when you appear. If you attempted to bring all of them and it didn't work out, then you can compensate, because then it's clear it's compensation. Compensation means this belongs to the first time you appeared. You didn't have time yesterday, so you're doing it today. You were afraid it's going to come to noise. There was an external reason. But to divide it, that you may not do. Atkan, God willing to be continued.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Guys, just to know, there's one more daf of Kachim. This is going to be a very big week. And I love Kachim. You got to get into the zone. The last Mishnah, that means the last daf Yud, Daf Yud and Daf Yud Aleph, is going into a much broader topic, like real mystical words. It's going to be an amazing week. And then this week and going into next week, we're going to start Ein Darshan. Ein Darshan is Maaseh Bereishis and Maaseh MERCAVA. And I remember a couple of years ago, we learned it over Shavuos, right? We learned one Shavuos night. We learned the 4.5 daf. It's very deep Gemaras. And that's going to be this whole week. A very exciting week.
How does this apply to Hitas? You were mentioning.
I was saying that there are certain, like the Chitas means that the shiur today, Chumash, is today's shiur. Belongs to today. If a person didn't learn it today, it's not, you don't tell the person you lost it. Make it up tomorrow. But don't lechatchila say, you know what, I want to be lazy today. I'm not going to learn any of my shiurim today, but I'll learn it tomorrow. Don't lechatchila do that. You have to know today is today's. The Chagiga belongs to the first time you appeared. That's when the Chagiga comes.
Does this apply also to Kaddish? Some people could say Kaddish for a novel. I could say wait till the end of the year, say all of the Kaddishim that they have, say all of the period of.
I think that's another great application. Well, every time you daven, I got to say Kaddish. A person who has to say Kaddish. Is there compensation? The truth is, I don't even know if there's compensation. I don't even know if there's compensation by Kaddish. There's compensation for Kaddish. If you missed one day, you say, okay, so here you go. Very good. No, it's compensation means compensation. Compensation means not lachatchila. And here we're saying that if it's lachatchila, we don't even accept it from you.